Hi everyone, Tia here from Order of the Bookish. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Author Talks interview. Today we have a super incredible author. She's doing amazing things in her personal life and in her author life. This is Riley Kade. Now she is a romance spicy author. She's getting into fantasy and she's a new mom, and she's had a little bit of trouble with Amazon recently. So Riley, I would love to hear about your books, about your writing inspiration, and give us all the details on your life.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. Not quite sure where to start. So right before COVID, I decided to leave my teaching job and I went back and got like a master's in math, and then COVID hit and it was just a dark time at the computer. And secretly in that time, I was frantically writing romance novels, but I wasn't telling anyone what I was doing. And then one day I decided to tell my partner, like, hey, by the way, I wrote a book, and I'd like to publish it. So I graduated with my master's in math. And around that same time, we decided that we did want to have kids. It was a big sort of like change in our plans. And so my life over the past 3 years has just been taken up with the Carnal Fever trilogy. And this is book one here.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful. I love that cover.
yeah. And I have book two as well, but I don't know where book three is. um, so yeah, the Carnal Fever trilogy, and I have a 10-month-old now. So it's been a big life switch from math to romance novels and babies.
That is incredible and scary. How do you manage your time? How do you write as an author with a trilogy and more coming out and be a full-time mom? That's crazy.
Yeah, before baby came, I was asking everyone, like, what exactly is your life like? What do you do? And I was always trying to figure it out, but no one can tell you that because everyone has such a big range and experience. And what my life was I had planned for book one to come out in August, book two in February, book three in August. So I was going to, like, not rapid release, but I was going to release the whole trilogy over the course of a year. And then baby came in December. And so it went like book launch, baby launch, book launch, book launch. It was very fast. And I had no idea. I was basically done with the trilogy. I needed to edit book three when baby came in December. And book three was coming in August. So I felt kind of okay with that timeline. But I had, no idea what it was going to be like. But what ended up happening actually is I started writing again like 2 months into postpartum, which was not my original plan. But I was up in the middle of the night and I was like watching a newborn sleep. I was very sleep deprived because you feed and diaper like every 2 hours for months. And I was a little bit like high on that and really high on like love hormones. And I was like watching this newborn sleep and I began to think of this other world and this like magic system based around just like how primal we are and how we're all really, really animals. And so I started writing again like after 2 months. So yeah, and it's been okay, babies sleep, thank goodness. So when they're sleeping, I can write. I don't, they always say sleep when the baby sleeps, which is not really an option if you're going to be an author. But yeah, it's working. I just finished the first draft, so it took me 6 months, and it's like 650 pages. So it's not bad. It's a lot longer than it took me to write the first drafts of the Carnal Fever trilogy, but yeah, I think I can handle it. So it's just going to be a little slower than it was in the past.
Yeah, I think you're handling it so well. The fact that you already have three books out and more to come, and you're balancing your author life and your mom life, it sounds like you have like the perfect balance. I know maybe it doesn't feel that way sometimes, but hearing you talk about it, it feels like you're doing it right, whatever you're doing. I love that you're able to
Well
find
enough,
that
yeah,
balance.
yeah, yeah.
So that is a little bit of a shift between, your spicy romance and now an epic fantasy world. How do you feel about that shift? Was that an easy thing to do? Do you have to do some research and practice for it?
Yeah, so the trilogy is very spicy, but the protagonist is a succubus. And it starts out, she's like this farm girl. And in my world, before you like transition into a succubus, it's kind of like a vampire. There's like a specific moment in which you become that creature, and it's like very dramatic. It's like a very sexual thing because she's a succubus. And beforehand, she has no sexuality, or she has no sexual interest, but she has like this best friend next door, and he's secretly into her and she's into him, but then she becomes a succubus and it's this complicated thing. Anyway, and then it just gets like real spicy from there. But in a way that always like progressed the story. Like the underlying plot is actually like a war against fascism in the US. And there's these three different types of creatures. There's creatures that are bonded with nature, there's humans, And there's creatures that feed off of human emotions, which are succubi. They feed off of sexuality, but there's like other creatures like that feed off excitement or fear or whatever. And so there's kind of like a species war happening. And yeah, there's like this fascist government trying to take over. And ultimately, Sadie, the protagonist, gets sort of recruited as a succubus spy in that world. So there's this whole larger plot line, but there's a lot of steamy scenes that sort of like act to drive the story forward. Like they worked and they made sense in the context. So it ended up way steamier than I ever intended in the beginning. But I enjoyed writing it. And, you know, I was like, it was during a year in which I was trying to get pregnant. Like it paired well. Like it was all good. But now, you know, coming out of that, like I love epic fantasy and I love big plots and big payoffs. And it's not that the Chrono Fever trilogy didn't have that. It's just I wanted to go so much bigger and deeper. And every time I think of an idea, it's hard to contain it. And I was just like, oh, but what if this and that and that? And so I let that go. I actually originally was planning on writing these other stories that were going to be like really short and very high, like erotic intensity. And I came out of postpartum. I don't know if anyone watching this is like just had a baby, but I did not feel like writing about sex that much. So, like I just need like something where like only when I'm ovulating do I need to write a sex scene. Like once a month is good enough.
That's really understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like enjoyed getting deep into like a bigger world. I think it's the same spice level. Like once I got to those scenes, it's like it's sort of the same spice level. There's just not as much of it. It's bigger on the world building, and there's, you know, dual protagonists. And I'm editing right now, and the thing that I'm working on is how to write distinct voices, because I have two protagonists, and I really want you to know who's speaking without reading, you know, the top of the chapter, and just like understand immediately who you're from. So that's a fun author challenge. So that's my current project.
So a lot of challenges going on between like balancing life, between these dual points of views, shifting genres. I want to talk about your other big challenge that you know you post about often on Instagram. You're very open about like speaking your truth, and one of them is your situation with Amazon. So your books are available on your website, which I am going to link in the caption below. But can you tell us what's going on with Amazon?
Yeah. So, sometime when I was writing the first book in my trilogy, I decided I also wanted to write short form erotica. I was like really into this idea. And you know, it's big on Amazon. I thought it'd be a fun thing to practice. I could like maybe use it, like reuse the sort of like content or theme that I had written in my larger novels. So I thought it would all pair well together. I did not want to be connected to the content. It was like spicier than I wanted to be connected to, basically. So I was like, I am going to publish completely separately, a different name. I won't say what that name is, but, and no one's gonna know it's me. It's gonna be great. And I can like write whatever I want. No one will know. And yeah, so I had done some research on how to do this, and I'd read a lot about like one good way to do it is I have an actual, you know, company that I publish under Riley Kade under, and that is an LLC, and it's separate from me as an identity. And so I thought, okay, I will set up a separate account under me personally, but a different name. And then I have Riley Kade under my LLC, and that's a good way to have two accounts because Amazon doesn't permit you to have two KDP accounts.
Yeah.
But I'd heard that this was a good way. You know, you have a business account which has a separate number attached to it, and a lot of people are doing it this way. Apparently, you're not allowed to do that. I didn't know. And the thing that's terrifying about it is when you do something that you're not allowed to do, there is no second chances. And one thing you might have heard about, other people watching might have heard about, is authors. You're not allowed to, you know, violate their exclusivity agreement. If you are publishing through KDP, you're not allowed to publish, you know, an ebook somewhere else. And sometimes people get pirated and their work gets put up somewhere else. And then Amazon finds out and they're like, you violated our agreement, you're taken down, but they didn't even do anything. At least I did something. So it was February 13th. I began to, February 13th was my second book launch. And, you know, I'm like 2 months postpartum at this point. And it's the middle of the night and I'm like putting my book up and I have like my finger in baby's mouth because he would only sleep if he was sucking on my finger. And I'm like using my other hand and I'm like clicking the buttons like launch book. And so like this is what my book launch looked like. So I get my book up and it's great. I'm like very excited and, you know, sales start coming in and blah, blah, blah. And then 3 p.m. I think the following day I get an email and I see the first line and I already knew how Amazon was. So I went through the phases of grief like within 30 seconds. So I was like, they're banning me. They're banning me forever. There's no recourse. Fear, anger, acceptance. It was like so fast because I was like, that just happened. It just happened to me. It's over. It's over. It was kind of shocking. It was like the most like visceral body thing. My milk let down, because I'm breastfeeding. So like my milk came in. I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'm banned. Anyway, yeah, so that happened. And it's terrifying how easy it is and how much power they have. So I'm almost glad that it happened. Like I go through phases back and forth where I'm like, oh, I wish that they would just take me back. But I'm glad it happened, because I'm glad it happened now versus later in my career, because they have so much power. And it's just like I could, I had built up ratings. I had, for my first book, it's really hard as a new author to get ratings. So it means a lot. And I had just hit 50 ratings. I was like, okay, that's like a good place to be. And I feel really good about that. It took like 6 months to get those many ratings. And I was like, okay, but this is good. And I had done like all these promos and, but centered around Amazon, because I had been focused so much on Amazon and the Amazon algorithm. And that was where my attention was. And so when it ended, I lost all of that work, basically. Like I had readers, so that was good. And I had a website and had people that had signed up for my author email list, but I lost like all that work. So it was pretty like devastating. But within a week, I got my book up onto something called Draft to Digital, which sends it out to every other app. So you can now buy me anywhere. But I wanted people to be able to read on their Kindle, because that's the most common way people read. Yeah. And so I set up a store through my website. And when you buy from there, you get a file that can be read on your Kindle. So you can read in whatever format you want to read in, basically. And then I had to get my book up on, on Ingram Spark, so people can buy through. If you want a physical copy, you can go to Barnes & Noble and buy a physical copy. All the links are on my website. So if you go to my website, it directs you. So you can get a physical copy, you can get an ebook, you can get them in all the traditional ways. But I'm not on Amazon, and I don't like benefit from that like auto promo of when you get more ratings, Amazon shows your book. And that's been really hard, because when you're on a lot of different apps, I don't have a lot of ratings in all those different apps. So it's been rough. Like I go through times where like, oh, I wish I was still on Amazon. And then also, oh, I'm so glad I'm like out from the beast. So it's tough. And I think it'll be easier. The more of us that like do end up withdrawing, and the like less power Amazon gets, the better it'll be in the long run. But it's a hard choice to make as an author, for sure.
Yeah, you're not alone. There's so many authors, especially independent authors, who are completely cutting out Amazon from their lives. Like Amazon has a good side and a bad side. Good side being, it's free to publish your book. You use Kindle Unlimited, you can get your book out. You don't have to spend money on an ISBN or anything like that. And they do market their own books a little bit. So it's not as hard to push as it would be if you're completely doing it on your own separately, like Draft to Digital and Ingram. But, once you are published on Amazon, like you said, it's a whole beast, and it's overpowering, and they are very powerful. And if you do something wrong, they are unforgiving about it. There's no way to reach out to customer service and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Can I get a second chance? Nope, you're done. Nope. And that goes for everything. Yeah. That goes for the piracy, for, if you accidentally didn't know and you published your ebook somewhere else, if you didn't read the fine print, if someone steals your book and publishes it somewhere else, if you break any of the policies, paid reviews, which I also saw on your Instagram as well. If they find out that you've been doing paid reviews, they will cut you out and repress your book. And there's a lot of things that you can do wrong. And of course, they don't tell you all the things that you can do wrong. They don't give you a checklist and say, hey, don't do these things. You kind of have to figure it out, or Google it and just hope and pray for the best. Amazon, good if you're starting out, I think. But I think in the long run, if they don't get it together, there's going to be a huge influx of readers as well as authors just being like, no, we don't support Amazon anymore because you're not taking care of authors.
Yeah, I hope so. So definitely. Yeah, I had a scare with the reviews with book one too, because I'd put together a really strong like ARC team. So I had like 20 people that had already read my book that were going to post a rating like on day one. And it like triggered something. Like they thought that I had paid for them. They must have, because one of them, I had like a checklist where I was like sending messages to people like, hey, have you posted the rating yet? And one of them was like, I tried, but they said that I'm locked out and you're under review. And I was like, what? And I think it was just the ratio of people like buying the book to ratings being too fast. Also just like you have to buy the book and then wait and then rate it. Whereas these people, I had given them advanced copies of my book, and they like said that they had an advanced copy of my book in exchange for a fair review, an honest review. Anyway, so it really, it scared me at the time. I was like, am I about to get like banned for this? Like I was just trying to do the right thing. So
yeah, it's crazy that you do the right thing and you still get flagged for it. Especially
yeah,
for independent authors. I think indie authors have to be even more careful than if you're like, let's say Sarah J. Maas. If Sarah J. Maas comes out with a book and she gets 1,000 reviews on the first day, she doesn't get flagged because Amazon
yeah,
already knows she has that audience. As an independent
yeah,
author with your first book, you don't exist in Amazon's eyes. So if you suddenly
yeah,
start ranking, they're like, whoa, what's going on? This is not okay. She must have paid for something. So
yeah,
yeah, you
yeah,
got to be very careful as an indie author on Amazon. There's a lot of ways that, you can get flagged, repressed, completely canceled in Amazon's eyes.
yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
I do want to talk a little bit about the paid reviews because that is one of your most recent Instagram posts. And I'm so happy that you
Oh
shared
yeah.
it because it is a little bit of a, I'm not going to say a problem because I do want readers to make money doing what they love. I get to make my full-time income doing what I love, helping authors, reading books all day. But it's a little bit out of hand. And I think it is a little bit crossing a line when you're charging $500 to leave one review for a book. So can you tell us more about that, what your experience was with that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I didn't know how the sausage was made. And I actually didn't even have an Instagram account before I became an author. So I only have my author Instagram. So I was like delving into this whole new world. And, I reached out to a bunch of bookstagrammers like, hey, do you want an advanced reader copy of my book? And overall, the community was great. A bunch of people said yes. I was really surprised at the enthusiasm. And if someone had a certain number of followers, they would reply, here's my package. And it would be like $400. And I was like,
Yeah.
and suddenly, I've been also reading a lot of fantasy romance now that I've been writing it, which I also didn't used to do a lot of. And I'm not overly impressed with most of what I read. Like it takes probably like 30 books for me to find one that I think is good.
Well,
Like maybe I'm too critical, but it
a
takes
little
a lot
picky.
for me to and often the ones that are like promoted really big, I'm like shocked when I read them. I'm like, why did this get so popular? And it makes me
Mhm.
just not trust the system anymore. I'm like, why are these the popular books? Is it because this person has a bunch of money and they've bought like all these really expensive reviews? Because that's not why I go to Bookstagram. And I think, at the time of like Colleen Hoover, like it was just like very organic and spreading very quickly. But where there's money to be made, there's money to be made. And I feel like there's this like business, this sort of like predatory business that has grown up around Bookstagram. That is not Bookstagram itself. Like Bookstagram does have its own heart still and does its own thing, but there's like this other sort of business interwoven there. So I
Mhm.
don't follow people with a lot of followers anymore. Like yeah. And I don't read the books that they recommend because I just don't know if they're recommending them for real. And yeah, and when I first got those packages, I remember replying, I was like, well, I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I was like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Like, I don't have this money. Like, what am I supposed to do? And then I thought about it and I was like, no. First of all, I can't pay for reviews. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work. But it took me off guard. Like in the beginning, I was really surprised. But obviously not everyone is doing that. And most of the people that reply to me don't do that. So it's only people that are, making a living off of this. It's also interesting because when people have promoted my book, there's very little like follow through, right? So you have to get a lot of followers to get some follow through. So
Mhm.
there's no way that that's going to pay for itself, like at all.
Mhm.
Like that is just way overpriced, even if I agreed to it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so
yeah.
it is. It is that like influencer mentality because so many other markets and so many other areas of Instagram. So you have like the travel market, you have the food market, you have product testing. They all have influencers, and those influencers make a lot of money, but that's also because they're able to bring in so much money for the company. Bookstagram
Mhm.
is a different area. It's so nichey, and especially Bookstagram because it's very independently author focused, at least the area of Bookstagram that I'm in. So we have, the Colleen Hoover supporters, the Sarah J. Maas supporters, which is really big and popular. However, I think a majority of us like reading new and independent authors and supporting all those people and all those writers. So to have influencers in Bookstagram charging the same amount that other markets are charging, I feel like is a little bit unfair because they're not able to bring in that amount of income for the author if you're spending, let's say, $400. I mean, if that influencer is able to make the author back that money by sharing one Instagram post, then yeah, I would absolutely do it for my book. I would say, here's $400 because I
Mhm.
know, and I've seen your analytics, I know I'm going to get that money back when you post about me. But
Mhm.
realistically, you might get what, maybe a few sales off of it. And if you're getting
Mhm.
anywhere between $1 to $5 from your book, you're not going to make much of a profit
Yeah.
back from that post. It doesn't make
Yeah.
financial sense. It doesn't make financial sense as an independent author, especially when so many independent authors don't have that kind of income. If you had that kind of income and you could spend thousands of dollars on many different influencers, cool, but it's not realistic for the majority of us.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I get emails all the time from like, oh, I want to post, 500 tweets a day for you for 3 months. Send me this money. And I'm like,
Oh
whatever,
gosh.
just whatever, dude.
A little spammy, but yeah. Most of them I try to apply it because I have my order of the bookish page, and I've gotten a few people message me, talking about, oh, I want to give you my package because you're an author, because I use a hashtag, author interview. So they're looking me up on my hashtag and not looking at my profile, seeing that I'm a company, not an author.
Mm,
And then on my author
mhm.
page, because I have a separate author page, then I get just like tons of spam messages of, I want to promote your book for this amount of money. And I'm like, no, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it, but
yeah. No,
no.
just say
I try
no.
to
If
respond and
you're a
be
new author
cordial.
out there watching this, just say no.
Just say no. Yeah, say no, thank you. I appreciate it. Maybe another time. You don't have to be rude about it, because I have
Mhm.
seen people post in replies to those messages and they're very rude and a little bit disrespectful. I understand that the people who are charging that amount, they're real human beings. They're trying to make their income. They're making a full-time living. So I try to respond and just be nice about it and say, no, thank you. I can't afford that right now.
Yeah.
Um, and then just let it be. So, Riley, thank you so much for being here. So we've talked about your book, we've talked about Amazon, we've talked about reviews. One thing I really want to get into a little bit is, your tips for writing specifically. So you have switched
Hmm.
genres, and that's a struggle. And you also said that as you were writing your spicy scenes, you were writing your spicy scenes in a way that drives the plot. So can you tell us a little bit, give us those writer tips on how you create a spicy scene that's not separate of its own, that actually moves the plot forward, because
Oh,
authors
yeah.
go either way, and that's a bit of a challenge to write spice into a book that will actually help the book and not just kind of be a random scene.
Yeah. Okay, what helped me? I had a beta reader. She's like, I always skip the sex scenes. She's like, I read a bunch and I always skip them. And I was like, I'm gonna get her to read them. What I want them to drive like the plot. And I think it makes, I mean, just like anything, the context matters. Like what is happening in the scene doesn't matter to anyone, even in real life, like I've had very different experiences in my own life, and where ones that are just like super impactful on me and ones that are totally forgettable. And I think it's the context that matters. And so I like it to like, I like the tension, I like the build up. And then I like, there's something that somebody wants, or something that, there's some barrier that you're like fighting through. And you feel that. Like I feel like when a scene isn't working for me, it's like the shape of it is wrong. It's like I just wrote a line and I don't know why that line is there. It feels totally superfluous. And I feel like that's true anywhere in the book. Like if you write a line, you're like, why I didn't need to include that detail for any reason. The same is true with the steamy scenes. So every line should like be there for some reason.
Mhm.
And in this case, like the reason can just be it's erotic, but I like the larger plot. But yeah, for me, those are the scenes that I cannot be interrupted during. So I need like 2-3 hours, and I write like the fastest, and I can't like break, because I'm just like, here's the shape, here's the shape, here's the shape. It builds, it builds, it builds, and I just need to like do that in one go. So that is it. And like battle scenes, like battle scenes and sex scenes, like just don't break it. I just need to feel like the tension build and the pace build, and if you like break it, I can't. So I need like dedicated time, which is much harder with a baby. But but yes, that is definitely, I find them like the easiest things to write. And then sometimes like I'll write those scenes first, and that's like the big, like the moments in which the story switches in some way in tone. And then I write from each scene. Like, okay, from here, we got to this point, here's like a low tension, here's a high tension, and then we're writing in between. But that's only because there was a succubus story and there was a lot of steam. That is not the case for my new book.
So what's different about this book that's not the same as the spicy scenes in the first series?
Yeah, it's a lot slower burn. I think the buildup is kind of the same, but it's also, yeah, the Carnal Fever trilogy has multiple plot lines that sort of develop, and each book really sort of centers one of the romances. And so the Succubus has sort of three long-term love interests, and book one was mostly centered around the best friend next door. Book two was mostly centered around a rival in the spy network. And book three is mostly centered around the underground leader, the daughter of the underground leader movement. So I was sort of writing intertwined different love stories that sort of spanned out. Whereas this trilogy, it's a lot more complicated than Network, and it's going to span 3 books, maybe 4. So it unfolds a little slower. So that's been a big difference. It's also interesting. Carnal Fever trilogy, totally character driven. What happened, I was literally just where are we going now? Where are we going now? And I had markers this is how the book ends, this is where we end up. But I was driven by character. Not true for my new series. It's called The Veil Breaker. So for The Veil Breaker, very plot driven. I knew what the plot twist was at the end of each book, and I was writing towards that, and I knew what the major sort of turning points were. And now that I'm editing, I'm like, who are my characters? And I realized that one essential sort of snarky character, she's actually sort of a sad lost soul, and she's way too confident in herself in the beginning. I was like, she would not be confident. That's something that she has to earn over time. And so now that I'm rewriting it, I'm having to really tease out the characters, which is kind of fun, but it's completely different.
That's so interesting that you kind of had a whole reversal between the two genres that you're writing. You completely switched up your genre and your writing style. And not even
Yeah.
on purpose. It kind of just it sounds like it happened sort of fluidly and naturally. It was pre-baby and then post-baby is 2 different writings.
Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really super.
Wow.
I love character. I would have thought I'd always be character driven anything I wrote, because that's what I'm there for. But this is, there's prophecies involved, and yeah, there's plot twists. And so it's very plot heavy, and there's things that are fixed. So the characters need to match that, and they're having to bend. And I need to clean them up in the second draft, which I'm really excited to read the final draft of this book, The Veil Breaker.
I'm excited too. I love your writing style and I love your characters. Your main character, I don't know if you've seen Lost Girl. She's a succubus and she's like the girl next door. She has a whole transformative moment where she becomes herself. And your main character gives me Lost Girl vibes so much, especially with the multiple love interests. Very exciting. One of my favorite shows when I was, years ago.
Yeah, I love Lost Girl too. There was so much I didn't like about it. But it was exactly for me. And I was like, oh, if I were to rewrite Lost Girl. I mean, what I ended up writing is nothing like that show, but it has those components. It's succubus, she really comes into herself, multiple love interests, bisexual heroine, all these things that I was oh, yeah.
But the actual world, the government and everything, that's all different. But yeah, the main characters, I get that vibe very much. And I like the way that you kind of redid it, because I agree with you. Lost Girl I loved, but thinking back, I'm there were some things that I wasn't a big fan of. So
yeah,
I love your writing. Thank you so much for sharing your voice with the world and for coming up with a new series. I'm very excited for it. Fantasy is my genre. So, I will absolutely be one of your first buyers. As soon as you get it out in the world, let me know so I can be one of the first people to buy and read it. Thank you so much for, sharing all your tips, because these tips are absolutely wonderful for new and independent authors and writers, up and coming, who want to be published one day. Truly inspirational the way you were able to produce books and also have a child. Crazy. I know you've already done it, so it probably doesn't seem like a big deal to you anymore, but it is a big deal that you were able to balance so nicely and continue having your world building and building a new world for your baby. So thank you so much, Riley, for being here. I would love to do this again sometime, because I feel like you have so much more to share. But we are running out of time. So do you have any more last tips, last information that you want to share with readers and authors who are watching this?
Yeah, I think write the thing that you're really passionate about. It's just it's been so trendy to join this industry, and the golden days of it are gone, right? So don't join it for the money. There, write what you want to write, because that's what's going to drive you in the hard days.
Mm-hmm. And watch out for Amazon. Read their disclosures and their rules.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Riley. Everyone, go look at the caption below. I'm going to link all of her information, the link to her website where you can buy all her books. And thank you so much. Happy reading, everyone.